Jerrika Hinton stars as Millie Morris, an FBI agent who comes into contact with a group of Nazi hunting vigilantes in Amazon's Hunters. I'm Tony Ruiz of Gold Derby. And Jerrika, I have to imagine when you look at this script the first time, there has to be a strange reaction to it. What was your reaction when you first started looking at this series?
Oh, I mean, my strange reaction when I read the script was that I fell in love with it. Is that strange? I was really impressed by David's writing. I was really impressed by his writing. I was impressed by how he fleshed out even just like the skeleton of Millie in the pilot. I was very impressed by the history lesson I was getting by going through the script. I immediately ran to Google and was like, I'm sorry, what happened within our government? And so, yeah, I mean, and it was also very timely. I remember when I first finished the pilot before auditioning, that happened to be the exact same day that we got that test alert from President 45. And so genuinely, the second I closed the final page on the script about, this subterfuge and all of these ways that these forces have infiltrated the American government and all of our systems, genuinely, right after I've closed that final page, I get this strange presidential text, and so it was just really, it was a coincidence.
Well, it's interesting because you talk about the timeliness of it, and I have to imagine that as you're filming the series, even though it's set in the 1970s and it deals with this kind of Fourth Reich, so to speak, uprising, that there has to be a lot of parallels in terms of like the resurgence in kind of white nationalism that we've seen, on the fringes of our politics. So did that add a special layer of authenticity to what you guys were doing, even though it is a period piece?
Well, I think on some level that question might be best for David and Nikki, our showrunners, because for me as a Black woman, I mean, racism has always been there. It's never been a force that's been invisible to me, and so and it's never been a force that I've been inoculated from. So I understand how, from an audience point of view, all of the parallels seem even more stark. But for me, in my personal life, and also through the lens that I immediately saw Millie going through the show in, it all just felt, it all felt like it was in the, I don't know, it all felt right. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, it makes total sense. Because Millie is so. What I love about her is that she could easily just be like this kind of just dogged FBI agent, but she has so many layers. She has so many layers to her as a woman of color, as a woman of a certain sexuality, as we see, and all those layers.
Color queer.
Okay. I like to let the actor do
That's
it.
very good.
But was there one particular aspect of her, because she is all of these things, was there one particular aspect of her that was the most challenging for you to play?
Oh, that's a lovely question. Was there one particular aspect that was the most challenging to play? Huh. I'm not quite sure how to answer that. I mean, I feel like I immediately felt a kinship and an empathy, a kinship to and an empathy for Millie. She's a person who wants her actions to matter in the world. She's a person who sees the world in a very binary way, growing up as a devout Catholic, working for the government, devoting herself to these very large systems to keep the world making sense in the way that she thinks it could and should. And so these were things that I immediately connected to, and they didn't feel difficult to understand and to build on. I would say, if anything, the kind of gymnastics that I had to play with, were figuring out her motivation for joining the Bureau during that time. You know, somebody who knew the information, somebody who lived through the civil rights movement, and knew the ways in which the Bureau and our government was playing games during that time. You know, what would make somebody fully believe that they could change the system from the inside, because that's where that's where the heart of Millie resides. And so finding ways to connect to that were a bit challenging at times, but overall, I think, you know, she's somebody that we all can kind of understand. Like, you know, in our hearts, many of us carry somewhat of a Pollyanna point of view, whether or not we want to admit it. And I think that that's an admirable thing that she has. And even through the course of the season, there's a bit of that still is kept alive within her.
Yes, a Pollyanna that can also kick some ass.
Absolutely. Who's to say Pollyanna can't kick ass?
You know, it was interesting when I was rewatching the season. You know, really for your character, I feel like a lot of it all comes to head in that interrogation scene between Millie and Meyer Offerman, played by Al Pacino. So, you know, I have to imagine that, you know, on that day when you're just going to be you and Al Pacino in a room, what was your feelings going into that day, and what was it like working with him? Because that's such an intense scene.
Oh my God, it's so intense. I was excited. That was one of my favorite scenes in the whole series. You know, these two forces finally meeting, and these kind of separate pieces, these separate shows finally coming together into one show. And so it was exhausting in all of the best ways. You know, before we shot the scene, there were a couple of little tweaks and notes that I sent to David, being like, you know, I'm not sure about this or about this. How do we connect that dot? And David was like, oh, you know, I trust that it'll work out. And it was so wonderful that the second we got there on the same day, Al himself was like, so this point and this point, you know, how do we get this to work out? And I was just like, that's what look at us. And so that was really lovely and thrilling, just kind of right off the bat. You know, collaboration for me is one of my favorite parts of this job. Actually, possibly my absolute favorite part of the job. And so to be able to work with somebody who you know has the catalog that he does, and still cares about the work, and still whose priority is to just come to work, do the best job that we can do to serve the show, and then go home. That's how I like to live. I love working with people who are that way, and working with somebody of his caliber, who really does, his intensity really helps me hold my own feet to the fire. You know what I mean? It's not him holding me to a higher standard. It's me doing it with myself. And so it's just, like I said, it's exhausting in all the best ways. And it was so invigorating. And so just, I mean, gosh, I got to do that. That's great.
And not just Pacino, but I mean, especially as the season goes on, and Millie kind of becomes, you know, a de facto part of the Hunters, at least on a
provisional level.
Yeah. But I can imagine you're working with all of these different actors, you know, like Carol Kane and Josh Radnor and Logan Lerman. So what was the atmosphere like on the set, particularly since some of the material in the show is very heavy and very dark? Was the atmosphere, you know, were you able to laugh on the set? Was it a happy set?
Oh, I mean, laughter on set is absolutely necessary for me, especially if you're dealing with dark shit. You know, I mean, for me, that's the only way I can survive those days, you know, because you're spending like 14 hours, 16 hours a day, you know, several days a week doing this kind of stuff. And you got to be able to laugh. Oh, my God. It's so paramount. And so I'm always cracking jokes with the crew. You know, I think a lot of a lot of the cast, a great way to kind of release steam is also just to fucking leave set, right? Like, go hang out that crafty, get some fresh air. Let's talk about our pets. Let's talk about our plants, things like that. You know, getting to know each other. So yeah, the atmosphere on set is respectful levity, I would say.
I could imagine. I have to imagine. You know, there has to be some levity. I mean, you get Carol Kane and Josh Radnor on a set. There's got to be at least some level of levity. You know, as the season kind of ended, and we don't know yet what the status of the show is for season 2, but are there things that, now that you've played this character, are there things that you would like, places you'd like to take her, or places you'd like to see her go in a second season?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I'll start from her personal life. We finally we finally see her less fragmented. You know, she starts the show kind of at war with these different pieces of herself. And by the end of the series, there's a bit more unity there. She's had her own coming of age story that kind of parallels Logan's character Jonah's coming of age, right? You know, she's a bit of a late bloomer, so it's happened for her much later in life, but it has finally happened. And so I would love to see that personal life get a little messy, you know, now that she's a bit more comfortable being open in her sexuality. I'd love to see, I was joking with David, like I was telling him, I would love to see her go through a fuckboy phase, you know. Now she's out in the open, she's dating, like, okay, girl, let's explore. Let's see what it is that you really like, you know, rather than glomming on to that, you know, that first person that really fully accepts you. Let's explore what it is that you really need in a relationship. So on a personal level, I would love to see Millie be a fuckboy for a bit. And then on a professional level, now that the wool has been pulled from her eyes, I think it's only right that she goes even further down the rabbit hole. You know, she's been fully disillusioned. She knows that she can't rely on the system. She now knows that there is legit merit to operating outside of the system. So how far outside of it does she go? How dark does it get for her? To me, that only feels natural to explore.
It's such a fascinating character, and you've had, you know, so many, you know, different characters that you've played, you know, starting from Grey's Anatomy and then in film and television. Is there something about a character when you read it on the page? Is there something that you latch onto? What types of characters are you drawn to?
Well, I mean, I'm drawn to smart women. I love a smart woman. I love a woman who has the courage of her convictions, no matter what moral universe she's living in. I love for her to have the courage of her convictions. And I think I'm looking for someone who has room to grow, you know, because no matter what themes the writers are looking to explore with the character, with any given project, there are also things that I'm looking to explore with the character, with myself through a character. And so I'm looking for things that make me curious. I'm looking for things that make me scared. I'm looking for things that honestly, sometimes it might even be things that frustrate me about it, because I love a puzzle. I love trying to figure some shit out. You know, if this thing is really bothering me, why the fuck does it bother me so much? Okay, now I got to make sense of it, you know? And so, yeah, I think those are the things that really draw me in right off the gate. And then, you know, there are also practical considerations as well.
Oh, I love that. I love that answer. Jerrika, it was such a pleasure to talk to you. Everybody go to goldderby.com, make your predictions for the Emmys, and stay tuned for more interviews throughout the season. Jerrika Hinton, congratulations. Thank you so much. Real pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you.